Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something so many of us are living through right now. That really complex, kind of confusing stage of life for 18 to 29-year-olds. We're going to unpack what makes this period so unique today, and most importantly, how parents can find their way through it, right? It's the big question on every parent's mind. I mean, if you feel like the goalposts for parenting have suddenly shifted way down the field, you are definitely not imagining things. The whole journey to what we call adulthood just looks completely different than it did even a generation ago. So what's really changed? Well, for starters, just look at this number, 30. That is now the average age for a first marriage in a lot of developed countries. Those classic milestones, they're all happening later, and that creates this much longer runway into becoming fully independent. And you know, this delay isn't just a social trend. It's actually biological. This number 25 is a huge deal. Why? Because the part of our brain that's in charge of long-term planning and, not doing risky things, the prefrontal cortex, it often isn't fully baked until our mid-20s. That creates this really critical gap between what society expects and what their brains are ready for. Okay, so this all leads us to the heart of the matter, what you could call a real high-wire act. For young adults today, it's this incredibly delicate and sometimes pretty dangerous balancing act. And this is the core conflict, right here. On one side, you've got a brain that's literally still under construction, so it struggles with things like calculating risk or controlling emotions. But on the other side, society has taken away a lot of the old guardrails. Things like getting married early or having a clear, set career path that used to provide some structure. Now, when that high-wire act goes wrong, when someone starts to flounder, the consequences can be really serious. This unstructured time is when we see spikes in all sorts of risky behaviors, from drug and alcohol use to drunk driving. It's also a time of extreme vulnerability, with high rates of depression, anxiety, and sadly, it's even a peak time for being a victim of violent crime. And this is so important to hear, it is not all doom and gloom. Not at all. That same developing brain that makes them vulnerable also makes them incredibly open to positive influences. This freedom can be an amazing time for growth, for getting involved in service, for exploring passions, and for building a really solid sense of who they are. So, what's the one thing that can fill that void? What can tip the scales from floundering toward flourishing? Well, all the research points to one critical factor: a strong, supportive relationship with a parent. That is the new guardrail. So, becoming that new guardrail puts parents at a huge crossroads. It forces you to make a defining choice. Are you providing support, or are you trying to exert control? And believe me, they are not the same thing. I love this quote because it just nails the most common form of parental control we talk about. It isn't about caring too much. It's about stepping in and doing things that your kid actually needs to learn to do for themselves. It's robbing them of the chance to build their own competence. Now, control can pop up in a couple of different ways. The most obvious is behavioral control. This is when you're setting a curfew for your 21-year-old, or telling them what classes to take or how to spend their money. And the research is pretty clear. Trying to micromanage their life like this, it almost always backfires. Then you've got the other kind, which is way more subtle and honestly, often a lot more damaging. That's psychological control. This is using things like guilt trips, or withdrawing affection, or making them feel bad about their choices to get them to do what you want. It's basically an attack on their inner world, and it's directly linked to higher rates of anxiety and depression. And that brings us right back to helicopter parenting. It's a very specific kind of control, where you're not just suggesting, you're doing. You're calling their professor. You're managing their daily to-do list. And every time you do that, you're taking away a chance for them to try, maybe even to fail, and most importantly, to learn. Okay, so if control is the problem, what on earth is the solution? Well, it's about a total shift in your mindset. You've got to stop thinking of yourself as a manager and start seeing yourself as a resource provider. This is it. This is your new job description. You are an intentional transfer agent. Think about it. You have a lifetime of resources, skills, knowledge, values, time, and yeah, sometimes money. Your job now is to strategically transfer those resources
to help your child build their own strong foundation.
And what are you trying to build with these resources? Well, you're trying to build these 4 key capacities. And what's so fascinating is that both parents and their adult kids agree that these are the real signs of being a grown-up. It's not just about moving out. It's about emotional maturity, real independence, and being able to care for others.
So, how do you actually do this? It's a pretty straightforward process. Step 1, and you can't skip this. The relationship has to be warm and supportive. That's the pipeline. Step 2, figure out what resources you have to give. And step 3, this is the magic ingredient. Transfer them with no strings attached. No guilt, no manipulation, just support. Let's make this super concrete with an example about money. Say you help pay for tuition so your kid can focus on school and finish their degree. That's a helpful transfer. It builds their capacity. But what if you pay for everything? Their rent, their car, their fun money? Well, that's a hindering transfer because you've just removed any reason for them to learn how to manage their own money. See the difference? Now, of course, it's super important to remember that none of this happens in a bubble. This whole framework is massively shaped by a family's culture, their values, and of course, their economic reality.
Culture adds a really important layer here. For instance, in some cultures that value filial piety, the focus is really on a child's duty to their parents. But in other cultures that value familismo, it's more of a two-way street. It's about mutual support for everyone in the family. These values completely change how parental help is given and received. And economics, they play a massive, massive role. Just look at this. Over that entire stretch, from 18 to 34, a young person from a high-income family gets almost 3 times the financial support as one from a low-income family. That creates wildly different starting lines in the race to adulthood.
So let's pull this all together. If there's one big idea to take away from all of this, it's this. The goal isn't to stop parenting when they turn 18. The goal is to evolve. It's to make that crucial pivot from being the manager of their childhood to being the key resource for their future.
And that leaves us with a final, really practical question for every parent to think about. When you look at your emerging adult, what is one resource? Maybe it's your time, your knowledge, your support that you can consciously transfer to them. And, just as important, what is one form of control that you can consciously and lovingly let go of?